Welcome everyone to Video Game Soundtrack Review. And today we have something from, I wouldn't say our childhood, because we were teenagers when we were playing it.
Speak for yourself.
Okay. But we do have the vinyl edition of Golden Axe 1 and 2 from Data Discs today.
So we had a great opportunity to listen to this soundtrack. What I found, of course, from it is just to explain, this is the Sega Genesis Mega Drive version of Golden Axe 1 on side A, and then side B is the Mega Drive Genesis soundtrack to Golden Axe 2. So this brought up some interesting things while we were talking about this, while we were listening.
Because the original Golden Axe soundtrack is very iconic, I would say, and that's probably because we played it so many bloody times.
Oh yeah.
That it's like when you hear music so often, it's just ingrained in yourself, and you just know like every note. We just kind of do this. We just know where every note was going to be, and we were, I think, maybe a bit disappointed at first because, as you originally said, like, oh, we really wish it was the arcade version of the game, because as much as we do love the Genesis soundtrack, it would have just been nice to actually hear the actual arcade music as well.
System 16 board did have a better audio capability than
did,
the Genesis. So we gave it a shot in earnest. We listened to Golden Axe 1, and this was beautifully mastered from a Japanese Model 1 with a modded stereo output.
Absolutely.
And so we listened to that, and it was pretty much, from my memory, and we've played Golden Axe together as well, so I think it was pretty much a shared experience that it was very, very accurate, and of course this is on vinyl, and exceeded our expectations of what the original Genesis Mega Drive soundtrack sounded like. At the same time, when we flipped it to listen to the side 2, side B, which is Golden Axe 2, it's still a competent soundtrack. There are a couple of standout tracks out on it, and a couple of other tracks that sound, what was that game that it sounded like?
It seems like they were influenced by a very successful game they had called Streets of Rage. Which is very strange because, as we were saying before, like the Golden Axe 1 soundtrack is so familiar to us because we played Golden Axe 1 so much. Now, we both played and finished Golden Axe 2, but in all honesty, Golden Axe 2 is not the best game, so we didn't go back and play it multiple times like we have the first one. So it was almost like listening to some of this music for the first time, even though we'd heard it many years ago, and it was kind of that we're sitting there like, doing this kind of thing when a couple of tracks would come on.
I think it's an accurate way to describe the soundtrack for Golden Axe 2.
Yeah.
Jarring. So, it's a good go for Data Discs. Again, another fine release by them. Great art, and the inserts, and just the care that they put towards it.
Absolutely.
I've yet to have been disappointed with one of their releases. You will see a bit of a trend, because we will be talking about several of them. It's just because Data Disc seems to have a library that caters to a lot of games that we played.
Yeah.
That being said, Mike, what would you like to put on side 2 other than the Golden Axe 2 soundtrack?
I would have preferred it being the arcade version. So, like, side 1 would have been Genesis, and side 2 would have been arcade. Because I really enjoy the soundtrack to Golden Axe. It sounds like, now, we'll talk about the game on our other channel, but obviously it's heavily influenced by Conan the Barbarian and those types of barbarian movies that were just flooded the 80s. And you really get that sense with the soundtrack. It really sounds like you could overdub it on some Gladiator movie or some Dungeons and Dragons style movie from the 80s, and it fits perfectly.
Because it's so epic. It's sweeping.
It really is, yeah.
And okay, I'm not pulling an Ubisoft right now, but the soundtrack for Golden Axe is iconic.
It really is. It really is.
And it's just, there's going to be a link below, guys. So there'll be a couple. There's going to be a link below for our video game discussion on Golden Axe, which I think we've lost here a little bit. There we go. So the video game discussion on Golden Axe. There'll also be a link so you can see this beautiful gold disc, which I'm just going to pull this right here. This is a nice heavy 180 gram, translucent, gold, who would figure? And so we have a nice video of watching that being played on a Marantz turntable, Marantz TT15S1 turntable, which is acrylic, and we get to light it up from underneath, and it looks great. We're also going to put another link, and this link is actually, and I hope it's still there, because I've actually downloaded the music, because I didn't want to count on YouTube to constantly go to it. But there is a very talented musician that did put together a Golden Axe medley, and so if it's still available, if it's not, I'll delete this, but if it's still available, the link will be down there, and it's about 17 minutes long, or 27 minutes long, I can't remember, but stellar. Stellar. When I think of Golden Axe, I think of the music arrangement from this medley. So you've listened to it, and I remember I do believe you enjoyed it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So again, and that's the part that we love about the Golden Axe 1 soundtrack, and primarily the arcade soundtrack, because it was so iconic for us. Really, you were a teenager when it came out in arcades?
Yep.
Are you sure?
Because
I think I would peg you at about 9. No, at about 12 tops. Because this would have come out in 88 in the arcade, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I would have been 13.
Oh God. well, whatever.
I'm old. I want to play my Golden Axe.
Don't worry, that pension plan is coming pretty soon. But it was just for again, we're gonna have that conversation when we talk about the video game aspect of it. But just in terms of the experience and how we experienced it, but in terms of the music, it never went away.
Yeah.
I think that's something very important. You can listen to a ton of soundtracks. We found this out just by flipping this over to Sign B and listening to the Genesis Mega Drive exclusive Golden Axe 2, because there was no arcade counterpart.
Yeah.
Hey, here's a thought. Maybe instead of the arcade soundtrack for Golden Axe 1, maybe they could have put Golden Axe: The Revenge of Death Adder on side 2, which was the true Golden Axe sequel, which only saw light in the arcade, sadly. You played it yet? I still haven't played it.
I actually played it in the arcade back in the day. Yeah, I had an arcade that actually had it.
Lucky guy. But and the soundtrack is so indicative of this statement. Side A, Golden Axe, memorable, classic, iconic, riveting. Like it stirs your emotions. Yep. Side B, it's another soundtrack. It's a sequel to the game. Mike, we just listened to it 10 minutes ago. How much do you remember of it?
Very little. Very similar to the game itself. Because when we were going through, what stage is this again? I would never think about what stage was that? Like it's a perfect little parallel. Golden Axe 1, the game, iconic. Soundtrack, iconic. Golden Axe 2, the game, bit of a throwaway. The soundtrack, bit of a throwaway.
Yeah. There were some good tracks, so it's. I don't believe that the fact that the Golden Axe soundtrack outshines Golden Axe 2 would be a reason for someone not to have this in their collection.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Especially since side 1 is so great.
Yeah.
And something we haven't mentioned about data disc. Have we even done a data disc at this point? I guess we did. Streets of Rage, right? So we didn't talk about with Streets of Rage. After the disc came to the end, it goes to an infinity loop track that has a sound effect from the game. So with Golden Axe, side A had that classic slash sound. And then side B was some like little orc or something getting like.
I think it's the little magician guys.
Oh, is it a little magician
getting kicked when he kicked him?
but
it's a nice touch.
It is a nice touch. And again, Data Disc is put together. It's great artwork. It has the inserts, which are great as well. Yeah. This is overall great. But I really feel that with the Golden Axe soundtrack, is it was iconic because. No, if we didn't listen to this today, I think it was a couple of months since we listened to it last, and then it would be to the last time we played the game. But we can hum every single tune from part 1. And of course, that's exposure, but if we had that exposure to part 2, we probably wouldn't have the same effect because the music just wasn't as strong.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that, I think even with Golden Axe, like that first track alone, like just sets the mood completely. You know, the Village soundtrack. It's the one that I think everyone will have in their head after a while. Like even after listening to it once, it's there.
One thing that I really wish they did have in this, and of course they wouldn't because it would have been a huge copyright issue, is some of the sounds that were present in the original Golden Axe, primarily the screams. So you had screams from the Conan movies. You had a very choice scream from by none other than David Caruso from First Blood. Shit! When he gets, when David Caruso is in, they're all in the woods looking for him, and he trips a trap, and it's kind of like a spring-loaded wooden arm that comes across with spikes, and he gets like impaled on his legs. And the best Golden Axe scream comes from that soundbite. But, you know, it was nice to have just that little touch at the end. Like, I think it's way too much to ask to hear something like that. But proof positive that we don't necessarily just gush over everything without having a fair look at it. And this is a mixed bag. You know, this is still a recommendation for me, but it's recommended for side A. It's recommended for the artwork on the outer sleeve, as well as the lithographs, as well as it's a good-looking piece of wax.
Absolutely.
And from side B, the fact that there are a couple of really cool tunes that fit in with, you know, like the fantasy aspect of Golden Axe. And then you're surprised with what could have potentially been a couple of discarded tracks from maybe Streets of Rage or Streets of Rage 2. How do you feel about it, Mike? Like, what does this soundtrack say to you?
Soundtrack says to me that I can forgive Golden Axe 2's mediocre soundtrack, because the soundtrack for the original Golden Axe is just so damn good that it's worth the price of admission just for that.
I would feel, Data Disc, I really hope you're watching this, because we like your stuff, and we do, you know, we generate nice discussions about your products based off of great products that we enjoyed in our youth. If you were ever looking to reissue this, you may not even have to change the pressing of side B. Maybe just put a second disc in. Maybe put a 10-inch in there.
Yeah.
Maybe something. Get that arcade soundtrack going, just so you can compare it. And this is not unprecedented. That great Street Fighter 2 collection that you have, which we will be sometime in the future be discussing at length. The fact of the matter is discs 1 and 2 was the CPS 1 board, and discs 3 and 4 were the CPS 2 board. And it was so cool to hear essentially the same music interpreted differently on different hardware, which gave a completely different experience. So I'm looking forward to that. It'd be great if Data Disc kind of got on that. Data Disc, take the tip, please. Take the tip. So I guess that does it for this episode of Video Game Soundtrack Review. Golden Axe, of course, a great soundtrack for part 1, but it is so strong that we would recommend adding this to your collection, even if you never listen to side B. It's just kind of like Genesis, 3 sides live. You don't want to listen to side 4. You just don't. So for Video Game Soundtrack Review, my name is Terence, and this is Mike. We're looking forward to having another discussion like this, and please check out our other channels, Chargeback Forward, for the video game talk on this, as well as VGSR, if you want to see this beautiful piece of wax being spun on a nice turntable with a bit of lights, a little bit of sparkle.
It's like I'm there.